All of those things are termed autoimmune. All that means is we don't know what causes it, so it must be your immune system that's messing you up. No. And so I don't think we have autoimmune diseases. And so in my practice, I'm going to tell you what I think causes your fibromyalgia.
Welcome to the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As a leading manifestation advisor with a process that's, radically different from the old New Age model, mine is rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and my energetic gifts. I created this podcast to help you expand your subconscious limiting beliefs about the potential of deserving the manifestations you're calling in. Therefore, you're tuning into this podcast series to show your subconscious that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, you've already started the process of manifesting it. And just like that, the year is over, which is mind-blowing. But it's really been an incredibly special one for me, and I hope for you. May you have experienced a rock bottom, pain, growth, happiness, manifesting everything you've wanted. You deserve it. 2020 can be excellent. I've actually been a little bluesy lately. I don't know what that is. It's not holiday blues. It's more of just, truthfully, I might actually be in a weird magic dark that I wasn't recognizing because it felt like I was being tested by all sorts of things. So that might be sort of what's going on, in which case I need to meditate and see if that's what's up and then kind of shift my perspective on it. But I am so excited for today's podcast. It is going to be a long-winded intro so that I can set up the podcast entirely. If you don't want to listen to it, you might not have a ton of context going into it, but skip through. So I have been the most excited, I would say, in the last month to release this episode. I think I've listened to it 2 times on my own, literally in a little Google file that I had sent to our producer. I'll pull it up and, in my Google Drive and listen to it because I just keep learning more and more information. So to set this up, I'm going to talk about my health journey that I've been on. Basically, in a nutshell, the way it all went down is I was totally normal until about 27, in which everything kind of crashed for me. That year, I ended up teaching at a preschool, and it was a really toxic environment. It was really strenuous, weirdly to imagine. So at the time, I was drinking tons of green tea, no breakfast, smoothies, and then I would eat. There were a lot of snacks around because it's kids, so carby things all day to kind of feed my unhappiness. And I started to have major crashes. And so that's when all of my adrenal stuff finally really started. And how that presented was my legs broke out in full-blown psoriasis. I lost my appendix at the end of the year. I couldn't sleep through the night all night. I would wake up multiple hours and just not be able to go back to sleep. And then it just progressed from there. I would find things that would maintain it. I found Woman Code by Lisa Vitti, and that was really helpful because I was having an extremely tough hormonal imbalance, which just went downhill from there. And the thing that really, really killed me and killed my adrenals all the way were blood sugar issues. So I became very insulin sensitive and had extreme blood sugar swings. So the way that presents is I kind of curbed it earlier this year with homeopathic remedies. With my homeopath, I have an episode with Alexa Smart, we'll link below, and an episode with my homeopath, Michaeline, we can link below, so you can revisit those. And that did heal my blood sugar, which has kind of started to come back out a little bit, but it's curbing quickly with a new remedy. So what that looks like is I have to eat, at the time I was having to eat animal protein was the only thing that would stabilize it. No form of vegan protein, which is nothing I had experienced in my life. And so I would have to eat it within an hour of waking up. I couldn't have anything blood sugar spiking down to fruit. I mean, nothing until after I think it was around 2 p.m. So it really followed my cortisol pattern, which let me know that basically anytime, because I had tapped my adrenals so hard that anytime I was spiking my blood sugar, they were then pulling adrenaline and cortisol from my adrenals. So it totally wiped me out and fatigued me for the rest of the day, which then, if you know anything about the endocrine system, would throw me so hormonally out of whack, because that's number one of stabilizing your hormones is you have to have a stable blood sugar level situation for 3 months. And you'll learn about that, the mitosis of the endocrine system. So it just became a nightmare and got worse and worse and worse to the point where I was full blown adrenal burnout, unexplained infertility. And what that's looked like is that I've been tested for absolutely everything that has to do with fertility from a technical standpoint, allopathically, naturopathically, and nobody can find a reason why we're not getting pregnant. Max has been tested as well. And so in a nutshell, those are kind of the really big symptoms, which became so unstable. I mean, to the point where I had no energy, total fatigue, couldn't eat like normal people, had to give up caffeine, sugar. So finding Karen wasn't actually that troublesome, and finding Unique, my coach who coaches me through this protocol, I actually, this was a walk in the park for me to adjust to because I was kind of living most of it already. So the way that I ended up finding them, I've definitely explained this before on the podcast, but I was doing Pachakarma at Surya Spa. Amazing. The women there are incredible. Marta's phenomenal. And Marta suggested that I go and see a master healer, Chinese healer. And her name's Master Zhang. We'll link her information below. She's very famous in China. There's a book on her on Amazon. I think we can link that below as well. And they recommend that I see her because there were spirits around me, which there's always spirits around me. But I went to her and it was a really mind-blowing experience, to the point where she literally materialized a supplement between her index finger and her thumb right before my eyes. I mean, her sleeves were short. It was crazy. It was like an invisible ball became more and more and more visible till it was an orange pellet, like a homeopathic remedy, which she said, put under your tongue. And it tasted like menthol. And then she went into, explain my grandma that had shown up that, was to a T, and things that nobody would know and all that stuff. But what she really did catch on to is she said, your liver is so, I see 5 different toxins in it. Do you take a lot of supplements? And I said, yeah, self-prescribed since I was 19, herbs and supplements. And she said, stop all of them today. Nothing. And I was like telling the translator, can you tell her I have the MTHFR from both of my parents? And she said, I don't care. If you want to get pregnant, stop everything. And that's what's causing these other things. And so I stopped them all that day on blind faith, which was really hard. I think anybody who's ever been a supplement junkie, we think that we need that to survive. And I happened to see Marta that day, and I told her, and she was like, oh yeah, I don't take any supplements. And I said, nothing? And she said, no, if I'm getting sick, I'll take something here or there, herbs, but I don't take anything on a regular basis. And just kismetly, I happened to have this lunch with Unique Hammond, who I've spoken about many times before in the intro, that we ended up meeting and having lunch. And I told her about this experience, and she said, oh yeah, I don't take any supplements at all. And I was like, but I have the MTHFR. And she said, so do I. So does my daughter. It's been like no big deal. So I had a lot of expanders who helped me be okay with detoxing off supplements. I think a lot of people who experience hormonal issues or any type of endocrine issues were quite addicted to supplements because that's what you read. That can be really transformative and helpful. And so she said, yeah, I take nothing. And then I asked her, because she went through an excruciating case of Crohn's, which she will be a guest in January. And I can't wait for you to hear her story. I mean, it's unbelievable. Worst case of Crohn's I've ever heard of. 90 pounds, was sleeping 2 hours a night. Nobody could even touch her because her inflammation was so bad. And I said, how did you ever end up healing that, Unique? What did you do? And, she had gone through all the gambit that I've been through. She saw, the best naturopathic functional medicine, allopathic, TCM, Ayurveda, all that. And she said, none of it helped. However, a friend gave me a book of this woman who's a nutritionist in Wisconsin. She said, when I first started to read the first 2 chapters, I threw it against the wall out of complete frustration to try another thing. And it sat there, I think, for a day, and she finally picked it up and she continued reading. And she said, this is crazy enough. It might actually work. And cut to our guest today, who is Karen Hurd. And I think this episode, no matter where you're at in your health journey, is going to blow your mind. And what I love about Karen Hurd's protocol is that it's the most accessible form of healing I've ever heard of on the planet. You take no supplements, absolutely nothing. You get rid of everything. So there's no thousands of dollars wasted on supplements and, healers and all of this good stuff. And you're eating simply food. And it's such a different version of a protocol of eating food that you've ever heard of. In the wellness world, we hear of detoxes. It's like the juices, the cleanses, which are helping your liver get rid of that, but nothing's helping to remove the bile out, which is where all of that lives. And it's just recycling in your body. So I especially have been so drawn to Karen's method. And so the way that I've approached, well, first I'll start with what improvements have happened since I've been on it. So the very first thing that improved within a week, my PMS and hormones were outrageous. I mean, I was such an overproducer of hormones because when we first started trying to get pregnant, our very first try, we had a chemical pregnancy, and I kick myself because had we have probably just continued, we probably would have gotten pregnant, looking back in hindsight now, because at that time, even though I had hormonal issues, I didn't have nearly the PMS that I have. But I did reach out to the best fertility acupuncturist in LA. I just said, I've had endocrine issues. I'm just going to go and solidify this getting pregnant thing. And they put me on such an intense herbal regime that it was pumping up my hormones, namely progesterone, so high that within 3 months, 2 weeks before my cycle, was having the type of symptoms you would have 6 weeks to 8 weeks within pregnancy. So it was nausea, constipation, like unbelievable fatigue. I was starting to get hormonal acne. It just really showed that it pushed me into becoming a massive overproducer of hormones. And Karen will really explain to you why I haven't gotten pregnant and what that does to your eggs. And so when I met Karen through Unique, so the very first thing is I said, Unique, let's have a call tomorrow, because she's gone on to become a nutritionist and she coaches through this protocol. And she put me the very next day on this protocol. So 3 days before, I completely stopped cold turkey, all supplements, and then I started eating beans 3 days later, which is a lot of what the protocol is made up of. And, then I decided to reach out to Karen to really learn the deeper science behind it all. And I first started under her topics page. She has a wonderful seminar that you can rent for $3.99 for anything to do with hormonal imbalance, whether it's menopause, endometriosis, PCOS, infertility. $3.99, you can rent that, and she completely lays out what's going on hormonally and how it's all completely treatable. And I say this in the episode, when you Google something like endometriosis healed naturally, nothing comes up. And I love that Karen in this has a laugh. She's like, I see it in my practice all the time. It heals all the time and constantly. She's the first true hope that I've found in Unique as well. And so after that, I ended up having a session with Karen, who just further really explained in detail everything that's going on. And I meet weekly with Unique. She's my coach through this. And I've needed that support because, like she explained to me in the beginning, she put herself into full remission, I think, within a year and a half from her crazy case of Crohn's. Now is never better, complete energy, hormones are perfect, everything. I mean, she has a complete new lease on life. And so we meet weekly because she said sometimes it feels like 3 steps ahead and 1 step backwards. And so I can always touch base with her, and she holds my hand through this process where she's like, that's normal. She can keep me on, motivated, uplifted, explain things to me, help me, make tweaks. And so I work the most closely with Unique. And then also, which Karen explains in this, is so beautiful and so accessible because she has a full practice and has for 30 years, that she's now just released online courses like we have pertaining to basically kind of everything under the sun that people are struggling with. And I highly, highly recommend engaging with her topics page, because that's a really beautiful introduction to each illness that we are kind of experiencing today, what's going on, the science behind it, and how it heals. And she sees these things heal thousands and thousands and thousands of times throughout the year. So I want to share the improvements that I've experienced so far. very first thing within a week was that all of my hormonal acne cleared up and my skin has been glowing ever since. That's actually the thing people notice about me right away is, what are you doing with your skin? Because it looks like that pregnancy glow all the time. My bad breath, if I ever had any, which was actually rare, any type of BO, which I did have, I would have, because I wear hippie deodorant, that in the mornings I would have it, especially on days that I overproduced adrenaline. That cleared up right away. And weirdly, earwax, which I didn't realize can be tied to things like overgrowth of bacteria. So that totally cleared up. Stabilized my blood sugar because I'm eating beans a lot throughout the day. I won't get into the bowel movements, but all is well. Nothing anybody has to worry about ever again if you're on this protocol. I could feel my right ovary starting to work for the first time within a month. In years, it started twitching as if it was like activating. It raised my basal body temperatures from the 95s and 96 into the 97s, yet to reach the 98s if I'm supposed to. But it has risen, which means also my thyroid's doing a lot better. Significantly higher libido was something I just have not experienced in years with hormonal issues and endocrine issues, especially that week of ovulation. And now it's starting to be all month long, which is really incredible and hopeful. Yay, Max. I'm going to just get into it, but my cervical mucus, which I also hadn't really had, is totally aligning now with when I ovulate, and it's the perfect amount and texture and all of that good stuff. So for anybody in the fertility world, you get that. You get what a win that is. And now the coolest thing is, so just to tell you, I was starting to have cramps like 3 weeks out of the month, which obviously is a big indicator of potential endometriosis. The last thing I'm yet to be tested on, though. I'm not that worried about testing because everything else is clearing up. And of course, I'm seeing these results. Karen assures me that will clear up as well. So I guess testing it just to know, but I know it'll actually clear up at least within the 6 to the 9 month mark. You'll see everything goes in mitosis of 3 months with hormones in the endocrine system. I'm now averaging 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, which is incredible. And most of my PMS has cleared up, almost all of it. So I've only been doing this for 3 months, going on my 4th. I had my first mitosis. I cannot wait to see what's going on at 6 months. And then certainly I feel like most of this will be recovered at 9 months. So yeah. So that brings us to Karen Hurd. I'm so stoked about this episode, especially if you have family members that are suffering, anybody with autoimmune Lyme. I mean, any ADHD, anything to do with the gut. It's just so inspiring. Okay, so Karen, she served as an officer in the military intelligence corps in the Army. She's a graduate of the American Academy of Nutrition, has her master's in biochemistry, and is getting her PhD in biochemistry. And she just so casually happens to do theater on the side and sold a film to Lionsgate last year. Just this amazing nutritionist that's healing thousands of people in Wisconsin with her practice. She really starts this episode about how she fell into this. She kind of fell into this as being a nutritionist and helping these people in the sense that her 18-month-old daughter was exposed to a nervine crazy poison that basically threw her into the craziest seizure, had 6 weeks to live, and Karen had to go educate herself, as a mother can do in that crisis, within weeks, of how to heal her daughter who was dying in her arms right in front of her. She also experienced a miscarriage during this exact time because she was exposed to it, as was the rest of the family. That compels you right out the gate of how she stumbled into this and stumbled into her protocol and has since gone on to do really miraculous things. We cover most everything under the sun and how to recover from it. It's a very specific protocol that really focuses on truly detoxifying extra hormones and everything out of your liver, excreting it into the toilet, feeding your hormone production, and then really healing yourself on a cellular level. Her goal is to live to be 120. A really fun trivia we get into is that she turned her hair almost full gray back to her natural brown color in her 60s. I think we have a before and after picture that Jessica will have to attach to this episode, but we cover everything to do with hormones. So that's endometriosis, infertility, PCOS, aging, adrenal issues, mental health. The list really goes on. And especially if anybody's even being I don't know, diagnosed with any type of autoimmune, this protocol kind of works for everything. So without further ado, let's get into this. Well, I'm excited to kick this conversation off. I have so much to pick your brain about. I'm going to go through sort of the questions that will help everybody, and then my own selfish questions that I know will help people even deeper. So let's first, the thing we always ask every guest is, what is your astrology sign?
I was born in October.
Libra?
Yes, so I guess it would be Libra. You know astrology better than I do. So
yes. Oh, that's wonderful. I love Libra. My mom's a Libra as well. Well, tell us, kicking off, let's just get the short of the long story of how you even discovered this protocol from your own personal family experience.
It was started off because the medical society, as much as they're trying really hard, they failed me. And they gave me no solutions. In fact, they said that the problem that I was facing, and that was the death of my girl, Ruth. She was 18 months old at the time, and she was exposed to chlorpyrifos, which is a very powerful organophosphate. It's a poison. We had a lot of carpet beetles in our home, and what a standard person does is you go contact the local exterminator. They come out and they spray to kill the bugs. Well, that's what we did. However, the concentration of that particular batch of the Dursban 2E that they were using to kill the carpet beetles was highly concentrated, more than it should be. And actually, as we went through this whole process, it was recalled from the market, but that didn't stop the damage from happening to my little 18-month-old. We were all very sick. At that point, I had 3 children. Ruth was my youngest. She was 18 months old. I was carrying another child. I miscarried that child.
Oh, wow.
Who knows if it was from the poisoning? I am convinced that it was from the poisoning, but how can you prove that? We don't know. But Ruth became very ill. She went into grand mal seizures. Sometimes a child can go into a febrile seizure, a grand mal seizure. It lasts less than a minute. This seizure lasted and lasted and lasted. Time we got her to the ER, it had been 10 minutes. She was in a seizure, constant. And I don't know if you've seen a grand mal seizure, but it's,
horrific.
It's horrific. They're jerking, all 4 limbs are jerking. Their eyes are rolled back in their head. They're foaming at the mouth. It's
your baby. Oh
my 18-month-old baby, and we're going to the ER as fast as we can go. And we get to the ER, and the ER doc says, there's nothing we can do. We'll give her Valium. I said, give her atropine. I was in the United States Army for several years before this. And I said, atropine, because I know this is a poisoning, and it's going to be a chlorpyrifos, which is a nerve agent. He says, we don't even have atropine in the hospital. I'll give her. And then I remember he turned his back, because he had just said, we're going to lose her. And we've given her the maximum amount of Valium, and she is still seizing. So here she is on the ER table, and she's dying. And so my husband prayed, dear God, you gave her to us. You can take her away. And she stopped seizing. And then immediately the doctor jumped into action and said, oh my goodness, we need to do a spinal tap. We need to pull her fluid. We need to find out what caused it. And, we go through and we're in the whole medical system, and we're doing everything. She's hospitalized, the whole 9 yards. And they just found out that, they couldn't explain the seizure. And so they just said it was an unexplained seizure. I said, it's because of the poisoning. They said, no, it cannot be because of the poisoning, Mrs. Hurd, because she would have to drink it. I said, no, she's inhaled an amount. I know, I have Army training. This is what I train my troops to do. I'm a nuclear my training was in nuclear biological chemical warfare. I said, this is exactly the symptoms of a nerve agent. This is exactly what we would see in warfare. And I said, you have to check her cholinesterase level. That's going to be the key piece. They said, no, we're not going to do it. And
my God.
We're not going to do that. It has not happened. I had no joke. The top neurologist at St. Louis Children's Hospital, this was in St. Louis, this was happening. They sat me down and they said, Mrs. Hurd, you are barking up the wrong tree. This is not the reason that she had the seizure. It's unexplained. We're sorry she had it. She will have to be on phenobarbital, which is an anti-seizure medication. Makes you feel like a horrible person. It's just like a wild cat. She'll be on phenobarbital the rest of her life. And, this is just the way it is. You're going to have to get used to it. And I didn't accept that as an answer, Lacy. That's just
Thank God.
answer, yes. And so I went home and I started to call every poison control center in the United States of America. I talked to Dallas, I talked to Chicago, I talked to every poison, and I finally got a hold of a poison control center who said, you need to talk to Dr. Sheldon Wagner. He works at the university. He's a child toxicologist, and he is a PhD in toxicology. And so I contacted him, and he's in Corvallis, and he said, please send me a sample of the rug, because they sprayed this Dursban 2E, the insecticide, on all the rugs. Carpet beetles were everywhere. It killed the carpet.
Yeah. Sure did it. Boy, did it, I bet.
Carpet beetles kill everybody else too, you know.
Completely.
Anyway, we sent him samples of the carpet. I was nursing Ruth at the time. At that time, she's not eating anything. She was extremely ill. And so I sent him samples of my breast milk, and all of it came back very positive, over 100 times the strength of what's considered safe and normal. He said, your little girl has been poisoned. Why hasn't your doctor run a cholinesterase level?
Oh, my God.
I said, he said, give me your doctor's name immediately. I want his phone number. Within less than 20 minutes, I got a phone call from the doctor. So he called immediately, because now we got some leverage.
Evidence. Yeah.
PhD in child toxicology, because he tested all these carpet pieces, which of course we next day aired to him because we're a long way away from Corvallis. Anyway, long story short is the doctor calls and said, could you bring Ruth in right away for a cholinesterase level? We go in, they do the blood draw. Guess what? It's positive. She was poisoned.
Oh my God.
So then goes through, first of all, the administration, the chief administrator of St. Louis Children's, they call me, and he was very apologetic. I'm sorry, my doctor should have listened to you. They should have run the cholinesterase level. What can we do to try to, they're just trying to.
They're so worried about a lawsuit for this.
Very much worried about a lawsuit. And so, but what goes on then is just like, okay, well, now we have a child that's poisoned. Her liver is now failing because we have all of this poison that is in her system. So what do we do now? Well, obviously we moved out of the house until the carpet was torn out. We had to have the Illinois. We actually lived in Granite City, which is across the river from St. Louis. And then we had poison control or the Environmental Protection Agency from Illinois had to come in and clear the house to make sure that it was completely safe. They had to take by a special waste handler the contaminated carpet to a special waste facility because it was so contaminated. It was a big deal. And so, but then now I'm left with a very sick child. And so now I'm taking her to specialist in Dallas. In St. Louis, of course, we saw all the specialists there, specialists in Chicago, and they all had the same prognosis. Your little girl has less than 6 weeks to live.
My gosh.
Her liver enzymes are so elevated. Her liver is enlarged. Because she has to clear this chlorpyrifos, this nerve agent. It's her liver that's going to clear it. And her liver was unable to clear it. And I'm watching my little girl die.
Oh, my God.
Crying, but it was just so horrible. It was so horrible. In the meantime, I'm going through a miscarriage. I'm bleeding like crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Because I lost that baby. My other children are not feeling well. And, we're living in not in our home. We're just displaced because we're not going to go back into that house until it's cleared, And it was just a very horrible time. And then when I had the third practitioner, expert, tell me, there is nothing you can do. You have to face the fact that she's going to die. And I will never forget what he said. He said, we have never seen anybody die of this poisoning, and I would like to be able to take biopsies of her liver as she goes along in this process of dying. So we can have this for medical, knowledge of what it looks like, the liver as you're dying of chlorpyrifos phosphate poisoning. And I just said no and walked out. Liver biopsies are very painful. I got this little child. She's already suffering.
Oh, my gosh.
I said no. And I said, no one here can help me. I will help myself. And so there's a medical school there in St. Louis. It's Washington University Medical School. And I went and presented myself to librarian. And I said, hey, I don't know anything about medicine. I, have a little bit of training from my Army. My undergrad degree is in Spanish, Hello.
I know. Jeez.
So help me, what I'm looking for is, and so the librarian says, okay, well, we have, back then they had things on microfiche. We're talking a long time ago. Okay. Because Ruth now is, I won't give you Ruth. Anyway, so it was a long time ago. And so in 1989, this all happened.
Wow.
And so then I went and I started to read everything from what causes the liver to fail? What can you do to revive the liver? What can you do? What is everything? What's the cutting edge of research? What are the snake oil remedies? The things that are considered alternatives. And the more I read, the more convinced I became that it's going to be a nutritional approach, that somehow I'm going to have to help her clear this chlorpyrifos. And so I'm doing this, I'm talking about packing my days, because my little girl is dying before my eyes.
And they gave you 6 weeks. I mean, you're having to go through this research within the matter of 6 weeks or quicker.
Yes. And so I am packing my head full of information. I stayed there for days. I mean, it was probably it's almost a week that I was there. And I just left Ruth with my husband and my other kids. I had 2 other kids. So I just have to sit in the library and I have to read and read and read. And finally, I came up with a protocol. I think if we did this would help her liver to heal, to be able to clear the rest of this nerve agent. And so I implemented the protocol with her, and it was high in soluble fiber, and as I began to do this, she wouldn't eat at all at this point. I mean, she was sick. She was very sick. She had, her whole immune system was completely compromised. She had hundreds of thousands of warts that just popped up all over her body. She couldn't even walk through grass without having a reaction and almost stopping to breathe, because it was too much of an allergen. Her immune system was gone. It was so bad. And so I put all of what I thought that she'd have, based upon my research, into a little syringe. And it was actually a color of a green, so we called it the Green Dragon. And we would shoot this down the back of her throat.
And it was like a bird, a mom bird to a little bird.
Yes. Lacy, that's a good illustration. I never thought of it that way. And so I put all this in her mouth, and then she began to recover.
Tell me about that process. But with this tiny, tiny little person, how quickly did this turn around? I mean, it obviously took, I'm sure, quite time to really get her back, but how quickly until her life wasn't threatened anymore?
It was very quick. It's less than a week.
Wow.
Because that's how powerful soluble fiber is. Because since then, I have worked with people with fluorocarbon, which is a very, very toxic compound that will kill you in less than 24 hours. And we've been able to save both of their lives. Actually, I've had them call me from the emergency room and say, what do we do? Because
you're like the leading toxicology call in the county that you live in, right?
That would be right. So it's like, okay, we have to do soluble fiber. So it was a matter of a very short time. We're just talking under a week. The warts are disappearing. She's feeling better. She's starting to actually eat food. She's recovering. She's not this horrible yellow. You turn yellow when your liver's not working. You're just become jaundice. Jaundice is a word for it, but you can't clear your red blood cells because your liver has to clear your red blood cells. And she began to get better and better and better until she was well. And I took her to physicians. They said, this is unbelievable. We can't believe it. And what's so amazing is they didn't even, say, what did you do? They just said, so glad she's better. Well, what happened after that is the St. Louis Globe Democrat there's 2 major papers, the Post-Dispatch and the Globe Democrat in St. Louis at that time. I do not know how they got a hold of the story. I honestly don't even know to this day. But there was this little clip in the Globe Democrat, which I didn't even know because I didn't subscribe to the Globe Democrat. But it said, little girl who was supposed to die lives. And there was a little clip about it in there. I started to get phone calls from people to say, hey, I have this, this, and this. What would you do for it? I said, I don't know. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, I was in the United States Army. I have some chemical biological warfare training and, that type of stuff, but I don't know. And they said, well, we have tried this and this and that, and no one's been able to help us. And please, would you help us? And I said, well, I could go down to the library at Washington U and I can read about the condition and see what I would recommend, but you can't take that as gospel or anything like that, because I don't know, and I'm not qualified. They said, we don't care, help us. And so then I began to do research in different areas. And then the things that I asked these people to do, they started to get better.
Wow.
And then more people. And then it wasn't long before Southwestern Bell Telephone, which was they've moved their major offices to Texas, but at that time their offices were located in One Bell Tower, which is the highest skyscraper there is in downtown St. Louis. And they said, we have had so many requests from our employees. We do these brown bag seminars once a month, and we have dozens of requests for you to come and speak. And I'll say, well, what do you want me to speak on? Well, they want to hear about this or that. And I say, well, I guess I could go down and study about it and come up with what I would do if it was me, but I'm not anything, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. You have to understand, I don't have any credentials. We get that, but we have such, and so they just went off gangbusters. And I mean, there were times that we would fill the lecture hall with over 1,000 people.
Wow.
Where I was giving these brown bags. It's a big company, Southwestern Bell Telephone. And so then the Drury Inns contacted me and said, hey, we've heard about you. We do these luncheon, the same thing. Then the St. Louis Catholic Parish contacted me and said, we want you to talk to our parents organization. And then finally, the University of Missouri contacted me and said, we want you to start instructing. I said, I have no credentials. They said, we know that. Could you get some?
That's awesome. That's so great.
That's what propelled me into going into doing my work and getting my initial training in nutrition. And then after that, I got a degree in Spanish and I wanted to go in and get a degree in biochemistry. Well, do you know how much prerequisites I have? 0. Yo hablo español y un poco francés y alemán. I'm not going anywhere with, chemical reactions or anything. And so my father had always encouraged me when I was a child. He always said, you need to be a chemist. And I, typical kid, I'm rebelling against my dad. It's just like, dad doesn't know anything. I'm going to take Spanish, It's just,
Dad's worst nightmare.
But it didn't get me very far because I'm, did other things. And anyway, so I started in 2010, or actually it was a little bit before that, I started to accumulate. I went here, I'm living in Wisconsin. And I started to go to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire here and start to pick up the courses. Okay, I have to have so many semesters in calculus. I have to have so many semesters in chemistry and all the different, including this much organic chemistry and biochemistry. I have to have this many courses in physics. I have to have statistics. And I went through and did all the prerequisites that I would need to be able to qualify to get into a master's program for biochemistry. And so I did that. It took me several years because in the meantime, I'm doing this nutrition practice full time. And
you have 4 kids at this point, I think, right?
Actually, now by this time I have 5 kids.
Wow.
All my nutritional training. And so I'm done having kids. Okay, I got plenty, but I got so much going on. It's just like, okay, so I can only take a course a semester because, I've got to take care of all my clients because at that point, I'm working 6 days a week. No joke. I start at 6 a.m. in the morning, work till 11 o'clock at night, 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, seeing people that are calling me to try to get well. I've got a client basis. We're talking well over 30,000 people.
Wow.
Clients. This is a lot. When you're talking to a personal basis to them, doing the follow-ups, you're just like, okay, I'm trying to get my schooling done as much as possible. Finally finished my last prerequisite, and I did very well in school, and I understood all this stuff, was immediately accepted into the program as far as the Master's of Biochemistry, which then took me 2.5 years, almost 3 years to finish my Master's, because at the same time, I'm doing my practice. Oh, by the way, I'm also doing plays because I'm a playwright. And I'm a local author, and I write for a newspaper here that's the Tri-County News, so the Augusta Area Times. And so I got a lot on my plate, so then I finished my master's degree. And so now on for my PhD. But what is really cool is that as I have progressed through life, that I've been able to see, I'm seeing less and less clients because, especially as I was telling you about these courses before, I'm going to be able to free up more and more of my time so I can go finish that PhD and that I can then set up my research lab. So I want to let everybody that's listening know about Ruth and where is she. Ruth survived. She did not die. I call her the girl who lived.
Oh my God, thank God. And has she gone on to have her own children now?
She is actually pregnant with her first right now. That baby's due in April.
Wow. I'm so excited for her. That's incredible.
Yeah, she is now. She's born in 88. She's 31 years old.
Wonderful.
She doesn't have any lasting neurological problems that we have been able to evidence. We were able to keep that from happening. And she went through college. She graduated from high school, has a double major from college. She's a vocal major, beautiful voice, and she also has a degree in theatrical arts. And so she's actually my production manager for my production company.
Incredible. Well, speaking of Ruth, then you have to give us the skinny on beans. You just lay it down for us and why it matters. And nobody's talking about this but you.
Yes. And that's the problem. Even in, I've looked at, I had clients say, I'm a nurse, I'm in nurse's training. They mentioned the enterohepatic circulation on one slide in all of my years of training, one slide, and it was up for less than 10 seconds. And that's all.
My gosh.
What is the enterohepatic recirculation? That's how we saved Ruth's life. Your liver is your main detoxification organ in your body. It's clearing out all the fat-soluble waste. And in Ruth's case, this fat-soluble waste was this pesticide, the chlorpyrifos, that's that organophosphate. And then the liver has to get rid of it somehow. It doesn't just keep it in the liver. If it does, your liver will blow up and fail. And when I say blow up, it literally enlarges. It can get so large, it can be as big as a basketball. And so we have to get the waste out of the liver and out of the human body. And the way to do that is by depositing it into the digestive fluid bile that the liver makes. Because everything that the liver is clearing is fat soluble, you have to put the fat soluble things into a fat carrier, and bile is a fat. And so we send the bile with all of this waste product into your gastrointestinal tract, and it arrives in the gastrointestinal tract, and its destination is the toilet. It will travel through your small colon, and then it reaches the large colon, and you have a bowel movement, and you excrete it. However, there's this little glitch, and it's meant to be for our good if we knew how to eat right, but it turns out to being to our detriment. The glitch is this. At the last part of the small colon, we have what's known as the terminal part of the ileum. And it is from there that we absorb all fats. We don't absorb fats in our mouth. We don't absorb them in our stomach. We don't absorb them in our duodenum or jejunum, all parts of the small colon. We only absorb them from the terminal part of the ileum, the last part of the small colon, right before we enter into the large colon. So what's so significant about this? Bile is a fat. What we're trying to get rid of, the fat-soluble waste. In Ruth's case, it was poisoning, but we have a lot of other fat-soluble waste, hormones being at the top of the list. And all of those things that are fat-soluble, if we absorb our fats, do we also absorb our bile and the fat-soluble waste? And the answer to that question is yes, we do. How much? How much are we absorbing, and how much is going back into the bloodstream? 95%. And everything I'm telling you is so well documented. This is not some, I'm making up out of my head. You can go in any medical text or anything and read about the gastrointestinal enterohepatic recirculation. Entero just means intestinal, and then hepatic is liver, and then recirculation is just you're cycling things back through. This can be a very protective thing because we can reutilize fat-soluble things, and we can reutilize hormones if you didn't have enough. And it's actually a nice thing. However, if we keep recycling all of our waste and we never throw away more than 95%, we're going to start recycling all of the toxic stuff that creates so many of our health problems. And so what we have to do is we have to interrupt this cycle. We have to prevent this recycling. And in most cultures, they do, unless they become more like an American culture. And that is, we have to find something that will bind with this biomolecule and not allow it to be reabsorbed. And in the biomolecule, you're carrying all this waste product. In Ruth's case, it was the chlorpyrifos. And so we will have to clear that biomolecule. And so we have to find something that can bind with it, which you have to find a chemical substance or something that can do that. And not everything binds with everything else. And then you have to find something that has second quality, that it cannot be absorbed through the intestinal barrier. Well, we have something in our life, and that is soluble fiber. It's found in beans, like pinto beans and navy beans and garbanzo beans and lentils and black-eyed peas. They're the type of beans that Americans don't eat anymore. Other cultures, like if you go to South America, you go to Mexico, you go to places like the Middle East. I mean, if you go to some of those places, they're eating beans 6 times a day. I have a client that lives in Cairo, in Egypt, and he's saying, yeah, I'm stopping by McDonald's today. I said, make sure you don't eat the fries. He says, no, I'm getting the beans. I said, they serve beans at McDonald's. We're talking about the McDonald's like you and I know, the restaurant where you buy hamburgers,
Yep.
Fast food place. And he said, oh, no, there's no McDonald's here that sell French fries. They all serve beans because that's part of our culture. We eat beans 6 times a day here.
And what about for the person? I've heard this reaction, and I initially had this reaction. It actually took Unique being my expander and walking through her whole healing journey where she was like, and then we started the detox phase, which were the beans. And beans have been so demonized. There's always fad diets and all of that stuff. And I was actually telling one of my friends who's a big biohacker about this. I'm like, you're going to think I'm crazy. Just listen. And he was like, when I eat beans, it feels like shards going through my stomach, or I'm so gassy from them. What do you have to say about that?
That your beans actually are the only thing that are going to carry out the soluble fiber because they make those two qualifications. What you do is you start at a smaller amount. The beans are actually not causing the gas. The gas, if you notice, people should start paying attention. They'll notice they don't eat beans, but they have gas. So what causes their gas? What causes gas is setting off the fermentation process. We have two ways to digest our food, through digestive enzymes or through the fermentation process. The default state of the human digestive tract is to use digestive enzymes. However, if you kick into play the fermentation pathway, then that takes precedence and you will ferment your foods. And the byproduct of fermentation is always gas. Always, 100% of the time. And so then you bloat up, you feel so uncomfortable because when the gas gets trapped, it's painful. And it is the most painful feeling. It's more painful than having intestinal cramping. And it will feel like shards. It'll feel like there's somebody stabbing a knife in my side. Yeah, welcome to you can't get that gas bubble around that 180-degree turn in your small colon. And so then it's painful. But are the beans causing the gas? No, it's hormones that are triggering the fermentation pathway.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's why you cannot eat beans and you have gas. But if you eat beans, they're fermented along with whatever else you're eating. And so it's really your hormonal production. So when you're having the pain and you're thinking it's from beans, no, your hormones are up. You're busier. You're more stressed out. Your adrenaline is just going like out the kazoo. That's what's creating the fermentation and the pain. And so what do we do to bring all those hormones down? You eat beans small amounts more frequently. That's what takes away the gas. I had a client out here. He's in such horrific pain. And it was all gas pain because he kept running. He had actually ALS. And so there's a lot of problems that go on with that. But anyway, I actually paid him a house call because he'd been to the ER 3 times with this excruciating pain in his intestinal tract. And every time they did an x-ray, they said, well, you're not constipated. There's no stool in there. You're empty. Your gastrointestinal tract is empty. I'm sorry, go home here. Just take some pain relievers. He's on morphine. And I went out to the house and I said, and I talked to him, I said, do you pass, because he wasn't ambulatory. And so because of his ALS, I said, do you pass gas or do you burp up gas? No, never. I said, that's the problem. You're not getting rid of your gas. It's trapped. And that's what's creating your pain. And that's why they can't see anything on the x-ray, because you can't image gas. It's a gas. You can't. Of
course, it's invisible.
It's invisible. And so I said, you got any beans in the house? Well, we have some pork and beans. I said, that'll do fine. Let's get a colander out and we rinse them off, because you got to rinse off the sugary sauce, throw away a piece of pork fat. And they're navy beans then. Started feeding beans and he started to toot. That's what we call it.
Get it out. Exactly.
Get it out. He's burping, he's tooting. And then as soon as that started to happen, all the pressure went away and all of his pain went away.
I mean, I think it took me about 2.5 weeks to move all of that gas, because I just went in strong. I just went for it. I was like, oh, this will pass. And Unique was like, it'll pass. And I think 2.5 weeks it was done, and I don't experience it anymore now.
Yeah. And you're still eating the same beans. So why aren't the beans causing gas? Because
exactly. I also think too, my microbiome has shifted so dramatically since starting this. And, I'm feeding it, because of you, so much, what do you call it? Not probiotics, but prebiotics, that I think it's also, my digestion can just handle so much more now too, as well.
Absolutely. Beans are a known prebiotic. And so you've set yourself up with good intestinal flora.
Okay, so I want to go through a tiny Russian roulette a little bit, where you can tell us in a nutshell what's going on with these specific umbrellas of issues. And the way we can kind of set it up is I'll sort of pick a topic, thyroid, let's say, and then you can list off the top thyroid, not diseases, but autoimmune, just sort of the top thyroid issues you see in your practice, and then just give us a little precursor of how people are getting to that place. So let's start with thyroid, for instance. Okay.
Thyroid can manifest itself as hyperthyroidism hyperthyroidism, which means you're producing too much thyroxine. And that sometimes is identified as Graves' disease. And you're just full of anxiety. Your TSH levels, your thyroid stimulating hormone levels are very low. Your T3, your T4, those are other hormones are high. And you're like a cat on a hot tin roof. You can have these huge, massive, quick heartbeats. I mean, you can feel the palpitations in your chest that they're beating so hard, and a rapid pulse, very rapid pulse, shaking. That's all hyperthyroidism, and it's treated with medications. And what the cause is that you've overstimulated the production of thyroxine. And so what we want to do is reverse that by taking away those stimulants. Another thyroid problem that I see even more commonly than seeing the hyperthyroidism is the hypothyroidism. That means you don't produce enough thyroxine, that your thyroid glands or thyroid gland, there's actually two lobes in your thyroid gland, that the lobes are sluggish and they don't produce enough thyroxine. Why aren't they producing enough? They're tired. We have exhausted them. We haven't been feeding them right. We're not taking good care of them. And if you don't take good care, like everybody knows, if you don't take good care of yourself, you become tired and you're not able to function well. That's exactly what happens with the thyroid gland. And there are certain things that we eat that impact the thyroid that cause it to be that sluggish. People that are on that hypo side are typically prescribed levothyroxine. It's also known as Synthroid, to be able to supplement the thyroid so that you're getting that actual hormone. The better thing is correct the cause. That's just a symptom reliever. So you give the person an exogenous source of the thyroid hormone. How about we instead make it ourselves? So we have to rebuild the thyroid gland and make it healthy. And then there's also something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which means you have a normal T3 and T4, your thyroid levels are normal. Your TSH can be also normal too, but you have an inflamed thyroid, and we measure that by antibodies, thyroid antibodies. And then that just means your thyroid is really irritated and aggravated and mad, and eventually can result in things like nodules and stuff. And that's because you're eating things to aggravate it. And so, I mean, I can go through with those right now, but I don't know if that's what you wanted me to do.
Well, yeah. And what would be just a couple examples of those things that can really upset the thyroid production?
The major thing that upsets the thyroid production is your consumption of sugar.
Which is kind of the root of everything. We'll probably end up hearing.
It's definitely at the root of everything. But for the thyroid, it is sugar at the top of the list.
Wow.
And includes fruit sugar. So many people will say, hey, I'm eating clean. I don't eat any, sweets at all. I don't eat the candy bars and, the cupcakes and all the rest of it, but they're eating a diet that's loaded with fruit. The fruit sugar will do the same thing.
Right. Exactly. And give us the GI tract. What are the top issues you see with that, and what's contributing to them?
The top issues that I see are Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, although I have them all along between SIBO, which is the small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And I also see, irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS. But the ones that are coming to me that are so desperate are having Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. They actually have ulcers that are in their large colon, that's ulcerative colitis, or the ulcers are in their small colon, that's Crohn's disease. And they are very sick people. Oftentimes they're having 30 to 40 bloody bowel movements a day. They're in their pain. They're usually cramping. They have pain, and they have a lot of trapped gas too. And so that's painful. They are just miserable people. They're losing blood, so they're becoming anemic. Their hemoglobin drops. And if they get an infection, because there can be infections in the bowel, that if you go through an ulcer, an ulcer is going through the deep layers of our tissue. We have several layers of tissue in the GI tract. And if you get into the deep layers of tissue, you could actually enter the bloodstream with an infection. And if you get a person that has a systemic infection that came from the bowel, we're looking at life and death. I mean, life and death. And so many of these people are on antibiotics, and the antibiotics actually create more diarrhea. And so it just gets into a real snagglepuss. And these people are desperate and they need help. That's why I'm so happy about these courses, because I have people calling me and say, well, I'm not available, and they say, can't you see me special? It's just like, I have to sleep. If I don't sleep, I won't, I can't.
Yeah, there goes your thyroid, because you did have Graves' disease at a young age.
Yes, I did. I had Graves' disease, and my entire thyroid was removed. And that's another story too. And then I'm not even on the Synthroid anymore, but because I've been able to heal this and regrow my thyroid tissue, because you can do that. You can regrow glandular tissue. So, but the bottom line is, what's so great about these courses is it's just like, if you need help now, you can enroll in a course and you can get help right now, this very second, wherever you are in the world, instead of saying, well, I can see in about 2.5 months from now.
Exactly. That's what we had to resort to too. And why they're so brilliant as well is they're way more accessible and affordable. You can have them forever. You can go back. Usually they're loaded with way more information than you'll get in a session. I just am such a firm believer of courses.
Yes, absolutely. You summed it up totally. That's perfect.
And what about these autoimmune, like the top autoimmune diseases we're seeing?
Autoimmune is a scapegoat. That's the only word I have for it. It's a scapegoat. So we don't know what causes it. We'll say it's your immune system that is faulty and it's attacking your healthy cells. I disagree. I don't think we have autoimmune dysfunctions, whether it's the thyroiditis, that's the Hashimoto's, it's considered autoimmune, or ulcerative colitis and the Crohn's disease and many of the gastrointestinal problems we have. We also have problems that are like sarcoidosis, and we have arthritis, and we have lupus, and there's fibromyalgia, and all of those things are termed autoimmune. All that means is we don't know what causes it, so it must be your immune system that's messing you up. No, there is a cause. But just because we don't know the cause, we're not going to put it on an autoimmune plate. And so I don't think we have autoimmune diseases. I really don't think so. I think we just haven't got to the cause of it. And so in my practice, I'm going to tell you what I think causes your fibromyalgia. I'm going to tell you what it actually does, because I have tremendous success, Lacy.
I know. I mean, for anybody tuning in, we'll link it below, but you need to go to Karen's topics page, because not only is it littered with tons of information on each of these topics, but beneath it, you were on this radio show for, I think, about 5 years running, where the format would be
9 years.
9 years. And so there's so much content where the format would be bringing up an issue, you telling what's at the root of this issue, and then bringing on one of your clients who have healed from the issue. So it's so informative. It's unbelievable. So I mean, if there's anything I believe in, like our program, it's testimonials and success rates. And yours is very high.
It is very high. It is very high. And as I've been putting up these courses, we're putting up a couple of testimonials, because at some point I'll just have testimonial pages. But when I go back over, I've been practicing for 30 years. And it's just like, it's so common. I had somebody the other day who's a marketing expert say, "Do you understand, this is gold, people giving testimonies. You get them all the time. People leave you messages and you just say, well, that's nice. I'm glad you're better," because I hear them all the time that they're better. And it's just like, it's become so average for me,
I know. I totally understand.
I'm working on, going back through and, putting together testimonies, which I should have been doing all along. But to me, it's just like, it's just a day.
It's awesome. They there's results and they're doing great. And that's your intention. And I know I totally relate.
That's great. So yes, I have a very high success rate. So that's why my practice just has ballooned over these past 30 years to where I'm just so busy. It's just like, okay, I'm working 6 days a week from 6 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, till I finally had to say, I can't do that anymore.
Absolutely.
And you're me too. So.
And for the person listening, we're kind of just glossing over these issues, because I really want to make it clear that the protocol that you basically prescribe, it's pretty solidly sort of the same for most people, like fundamental same elements, just tailored a little bit differently per each condition. So that's why we're kind of going through these a little bit quicker for somebody who might be struggling with these. And they're like, no, I want to hear more. That's my issue. Just know at the end of this, you're going to get a lot of information, and then you'll be able to certainly tune into these courses. And the protocol is so doable. It's completely nutritionally based. So you're ditching all of the thousands of dollars you've spent on supplements, functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, blood work. It's really, really sound in nutrition. So don't worry if you're identifying as that. So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest, to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership, because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have, and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code, EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode. The next one that I really want to get into is Lyme. We hear about Lyme everywhere. I see so many people that I know in my community struggling with it. What are your thoughts on Lyme disease?
Lyme's disease is overdiagnosed. That's my thought on it. I think that there truly are some people who have had Lyme's and had a severe case of it, but it becomes another scapegoat, sort of like the autoimmune. We don't, you have all these muscle aches, unfortunately the testing that we have like the Western blot, the Southern blot, we have different titers. They're tested, they're not particularly accurate. And so we really can't identify it. But what I go back to, because I treat hundreds and hundreds of people for Lyme's, they come to me and they say, I have Lyme's, and I'll say, okay. And I just accept that they think they have a diagnosis of Lyme's, and I just build their immune system. Because you see, Lyme's is a bacteria. It's a spirochete. It's a very particular type of bacteria that your immune system will snuff out. So, and once you create that antibody for that particular bacteria, you always have it, because when we create an antibody, you create a memory cell. So if you're ever exposed to it again, it never even gets a chance to thrive, because your immune system kills it before it goes anywhere. So you develop your own immunity to Lyme's. And so you hear it all the time, I'm having a relapse of my Lyme's. I've had Lyme's for years. It's like, no, I think that you probably have something else going on, and we're just blaming the Lyme's. Maybe you had it originally, maybe you didn't. But Lyme's is building the immune system, and most people tear their immune system down. I was mentioning sugar for the thyroid, but sugar lowers your immune system function by 50%.
And not to mention caffeine. And even you really made me alert. I certainly understand caffeines in many things. And of course, for my adrenals, I had to cut out things like chocolate, let alone the sugar, so long ago. But stuff like kombucha, people aren't even familiar with how deep they're still compromising their immune systems with bouts of caffeine all over.
Right, because they don't even realize kombucha is caffeinated.
Exactly.
And it's just they don't have the knowledge. And so that's what I want to do, is just give knowledge to people. I don't need them to buy supplements. I don't need them to spend thousands of dollars. Just get the knowledge and apply the knowledge. That's the next hardest thing that I see in my practice, actually, Lacy, is you tell a person what to do, but they say, I'm not willing. I can't give up my sweets. I can't give up my coffee. It's just too important to me. And that part I can't help you with. Maybe a life coach could help you, overcome that type of thing. But how do you change your habits? You just have to, and maybe you address that in what you do,
I certainly don't really at the end of the day, because I don't the only reason I've ever made those big shifts for myself is because I've hit such places of rock bottoms, I've been wanting a child, and I've had such endocrine issues due to my adrenals, that at some point I just want to be a normal human again. So it's enough for me to be like, fuck kombucha and everything else for now. I don't give a shit. Yeah. So I think people have to hit that rock bottom place sometimes, because it's sort of addictive. They're very addictive substances. So I see that in recovery as well. That rock bottom place is one of the most helpful.
Yep. And so you have to get rock bottom. So I love Unique so much. You mentioned her before, and I love her so much because she is a great life coach. She's doing a lot of stuff, but that girl she's very encouraging, and, stick with it. Come on, you can do this, and that's what life coaches do. You've got a plan. Now, how am I going to help you stick to it?
Exactly. And holding their hand through it, which is really, really beautiful. What about more neurological stuff going on? So depression, anxiety, ADHD, stuff in that category, brain chemistry.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I have a very thorough mental health series that's available on my website. You can click that. That's on landing page 2 if you scroll down past the e-courses, and eventually I'll put it up on my platform with e-courses, but it'll still be free. It's on mental health. It is a very cerebral address. I mean, I'm not as dynamic as I am on my courses, because my courses, I know all this stuff by heart, and I'm, whereas, and I'm just talking as I go, and you can see where I am. But on this one, I actually scripted it all because I'm writing it for biochemists. And so I'm very thorough about it, and it will give you a lot of information into neurotransmitter activity, depression, anxiety, ADHD. All of these things have to do with neurotransmitters. They're a hormone type substance that allows a message to travel from one brain cell to another. The brain cells are called neurons, and the message that's traveling through this whole brain system, the network, because it's a huge network, they're called action potentials. They're little voltages of electricity. And then if you can get the messages through where they're supposed to go, then you can have clear thought. You don't have to have depression. Depression is basically you do not produce enough epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are two of your neurotransmitters, to be able to carry the message and do what's called trigger the excitatory receptor sites on the neuron. And then you can do serotonin, which helps with like anxiety, because serotonin triggers the inhibitory receptor sites on a neuron. And it is the literal summation of inhibitory plus excitatory, how many receptor sites, because on a neuron you have thousands of receptor sites. Are you triggering more of the excitatory or the inhibitory? If it's the inhibitory, the message does not go forth. If it's the excitatory, the message will go forth. If it's been super excitatory, you have lots and lots of excitatory, the message will go forth in an amplified version, and then you can get the hyper part of like ADHD. Or, so that's why you have to affect neurotransmitters. How are neurotransmitters affected? They are always affected by what we eat. Always. So we have to eat in such a way. And I have an ADHD course. I've actually finished recording. It's coming out next week.
Great.
We're editing it now, but I go into huge detail about what you eat to impact these things.
And what about diabetes? And then we'll parlay into my next big topic.
Okay. Diabetes there's two types of diabetes. Well, actually three, but the most common is type 2 diabetes. And then there's gestational diabetes, so 4 types of diabetes. And then there's one's called by a malfunctioning pituitary gland. And then there's your type 1 diabetes. And that is usually genetic, that you see children have it. And it's like, well, they haven't even eaten wrong hardly, and they already have type 1 diabetes. Diabetes is an elevated blood sugar. Elevated blood sugar is not a good thing because it causes massive amounts of side effects, including heart disease, kidney disease, small vascular destruction. So you don't have your veins carrying things that they should. And so you'll have neuropathies. Neuropathy is like you get pins and needles feeling, or you can't feel the bottom of your feet or your ends of your finger. And so it's really debilitating. You can lose your vision. You can go blind. So diabetes is something, if it's type 2, so easily controlled. I have thousands of people that have diabetes, and we always reverse it. We can reverse type 2. And actually, I have a lot of type 1 that we reverse their diabetes because they were misdiagnosed as a type 1, and they're actually a type 2, and they don't have genetic factors that would give you type 1. But if you had type 1, we can control your blood sugar so that you're taking very little, if any, insulin at all. And type 2, sometimes people take insulin, sometimes they're taking the oral hypoglycemic drugs, or they're taking like metformin or glyburide, glipizide, those type of things. But if you're type 2, you eventually can get off of all that. You just control this with diet. Gestational diabetes is something so simple to fix. It's something that happens in pregnancy, and you can fix that. I mean, literally overnight, you can fix it. So you just have to eat differently. And sugars, of course, are a major cause of diabetes.
And okay, so let's parlay into one of my other favorite subjects, which is unexplained infertility. When you've done every test and, on a functional level, everything's working, right? So it's like your fallopian tubes are fine, your blood work's fine, there's nothing going on with your uterus. They've done all of the functioning tests to make sure everything's fine on both parties. And then they say unexplained infertility. Let's parlay into that quickly. What is happening with me? I think you'll explain it so well to people.
A person is either overproducing or underproducing hormones. What people are not catching on is that your fertility is impacted by the ripeness of your egg. Every woman will erupt an egg from either her left or her right ovary each month. If you're having a menstrual cycle, you are erupting an egg. And the place from which the egg erupts is called the corpus luteum. And then the corpus luteum produces progesterone for you so that you can have a blood lining form on your uterine wall. And then that blood lining, if you're not becoming pregnant, will be shed. That's called a period. So we know for certain if you're having a period, you are ovulating. You are having an egg erupt from the follicle. And so many people I talk to that infertility have been told, no, you're not ovulating, but you're having periods, you're not ovulating. That's not true. They are having an ovulation. But is the egg underripe? If the egg is underripe, it doesn't matter how many sperm are hammering at the door of that egg, you cannot penetrate the cell wall, and therefore the egg cannot be fertilized. However, in the majority of cases, the
like
egg...
me.
Okay, I didn't know how much you wanted to share.
Oh, I'm open. I'm going to ask you some really like TMI questions.
Okay, so in the case of an overproducer like Lacy, what happens is that when the egg erupts from the follicle is the place in which the egg resides. It's like a little slip. It's like a little docking place. It is an envelope. And when it erupts from the follicle, this is not a just simple, it just sort of falls out of the follicle. No, it is squeezed out. It is a very forceful eruption, and it is shot out of the follicle. If your egg is overly ripe because you produce too many hormones, you will have an overly ripe egg. The force of the eruption causes the egg to disintegrate. There is no egg to fertilize. You still have the corpus luteum because the egg came out of the follicle, so the corpus luteum will develop, and then you will have a menstrual cycle, but there was no egg. There was no egg to fertilize. And no matter how many, there's just the whole egg disintegrated because it was overly ripe.
And what are the major contributors to the unexplained infertility, to this under or over ripeness?
The major contributors are what increases your hormonal production. And the first and the top thing that increases your estrogen production, and that's what's causing the overly ripe egg, it's caffeine. Caffeine always, and it is so well documented with thousands of studies, scientific studies that show the huge increase of the hormone estrogen when we're imbibing caffeine, whether you're drinking coffee or tea or kombucha, or you're eating chocolate. All of those things are high caffeine sources. And then the second one right after that is pheromones. Pheromones are perfumes and fragrances. They are known to elicit a hormonal response. We've known that for 6,000 years. We have known that they cause a hormonal release in larger amounts.
And this is essential oils too for the people.
These are essential oils. Yeah, it's all your perfumes and fragrances, including your household products that you use, like your dish soap and your laundry soap and all of those are all pheromones. They're all increasing this hormonal production of estrogen, causing these overripe eggs that disintegrate. And it includes the essential oils. And if a person says they're natural, it doesn't matter if they're natural. They're still a pheromone. They're still increasing the hormone. And then in addition to, Lacy, I don't even want you to have fresh roses in your home, or like if the lilac bushes, do you have lilac bushes out in California? I don't even know if you do.
I think we do. Yeah, I believe so.
We certainly do here in Wisconsin in the spring, of course. But the lilac bushes, it's a common thing is you take all these beautiful lilac blossoms and you put them on a nice arrangement on your dining room table. You can't even do that because the pheromone is because it's a very strong smell. Or like an Easter lily. Oh man, do they have this very strong smell. All of those things are going to elicit a hormonal response. And then you have an overly ripe egg. So we can't even do the natural sense.
And like me, how important do the adrenals play into this whole thing? Like I obviously have almost as shot adrenals can sort of be with I think hormonal fertility. How big is that a key factor to being overestrogenic?
It is a very key factor because the endocrine system which is a system of glands, works synergistically. So your ovaries that are producing estrogen are going to produce more estrogen if your adrenal glands are being stimulated to produce more adrenaline. And adrenaline is our fight and flight hormone. It's to get up and go. And I've got to get all my work done, or I'm under high stress. Then you're also going to be producing more estrogen. And by the way, you'll be producing more progesterone when that corpus luteum comes online after that egg has erupted from the follicle, and then you'll have worse PMS. You're going to have these horrible cycles, heavy bleeding, clotting, cramping, the whole 9 yards type of PMS. And that's because you're overproducing hormones because of your adrenals, because you're under too much stress.
And what do you have to say to endometriosis and PCOS, which I know are huge, huge struggles of so much of the Western population?
They are the same. I call this, and I've got the course already up and it's running, and it's covering the PCOS, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, as well as endometriosis. They're the cause of the same thing. Endometriosis is an overgrowth of the endometrial lining, which is from too much progesterone. And that's because your corpus luteum was overproducing. Why was the corpus luteum overproducing? Because you grew a tube. Your corpus luteum is larger than it should be. Why was it larger than it should be? Because you had too much of the estrogen in something called a follicle stimulating hormone that was being produced at the time this egg was going through eruption. So you've got a bigger factory, you're going to get more progesterone. And then you have the endometriosis. You have all this, and endometriosis is just extraneous growth of female tissue that can, if you've ever seen it, looks like a stringy mess in there, and it can actually attach your uterus, and it can grow outside the uterus and get on your intestinal tract. It's just a mess, and that's from overproduction of progesterone. The polycystic ovarian syndrome, that's an overproduction of the estrogen. That's the precursor to the progesterone. So you're making so much estrogen that you're stimulating that ovary not only to ripen the egg that's going to ripen and erupt out of there, and you're going to have an overly ripe egg, and so it's not going to be able to be fertilized because it's disintegrated. But then you're so overstimulating that ovary that it's continuing to grow, because these hormones, they trigger receptor sites on the female tissue, causing a cellular response, and that cellular response is always to grow. Well, what are we going to grow? We're going to grow cysts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what polycystic ovarian syndrome is about.
Tell me too, because it's so funny. I'm getting tested for endometriosis just because I want to know, even though I know I'm going to reverse it if I do have it through this, I'm thinking. But when you Google online, you're like, I healed endometriosis naturally. Nothing really comes up. Have you seen complete reversal of endometriosis to where people can get pregnant very easily after it's completely gone? Symptoms have totally gone.
Yes, ma'am. Over and over and over again.
So there's total hope for somebody who's struggling with this, and that takes over your month, almost you may have one good week a month. You see that enough.
I see it all the time.
Amazing. I love that. Okay. Another big question. Well, I want to go through kind of some of the common important, odd things. Not odd, you just don't hear these that much, right? In the natural holistic world, you're getting supplements shoved at you and herbs all the time. I want your skinny on it, because I'm completely supplement free now due to a healer I saw before you, and then you really hammered that home for me.
Yeah. The problem with supplements is that they are eliciting a hormonal response. They are cellular mediators. We call them adaptogens. They're going to excite the cell into some action. That's what we're trying to avoid. That's what sugar does. That's what caffeine does. That's what tobacco does. That's what all these things we're trying to get rid of. They do. But you'll say, but they relieve my symptoms. Well, so does caffeine. Have you ever noticed when you take a caffeinated beverage, you feel brighter and happier and better?
Your headache's gone sometimes. So many things.
And that's why we do the nicotine, or we vape, or whatever we're doing. It's because you have a relief of symptoms. But what you actually created is that you made the cause that's creating those symptoms, you made the cause even worse, because now your adrenals are even more fatigued. See, these are whips to the adrenal glands to produce adrenaline. Of course, when you're producing more adrenaline, you're producing more estrogen. You produce more estrogen, you're going to produce more progesterone. And it's just this cascade effect. And so the supplements, and people say, wait, this is whole food I'm taking, it doesn't matter, because we cannot, in a supplement, we cannot put all of the nutrients that you find in food, we cannot put them in a supplement. It is physically impossible. Like if
they're almost isolated, or they have a few key vitamins or ingredients in them.
They're isolated. They have a few key vitamins, but what most people don't know is for those vitamins to work in the way they're supposed to, they have to be there present with all of the cofactors. And oftentimes there are literally 10,000 cofactors to one active vitamin. Well, where are those cofactors? We haven't even identified them all. In biochemistry, like in a tomato, we know there are 10,000 cofactors that make that vitamin C that's found in tomato active. We've been able to identify about 10 of them.
What's so interesting too is I was really afraid, right, to get when I have the MTHFR from both parents, and I want to hear actually more of your thoughts on gene mutations. So I was really afraid, based on what we hear in the holistic world, to get off my methylated Bs. And what is so bananas is when I stopped, right away my adrenals started to heal, because I didn't realize I was taking those Bs first thing in the morning, and they were literally cracking me out because they were giving me such a hormonal, I want to say, adrenaline push for the morning.
It was an adrenaline push. Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what it was.
I could feel it right away because I would crash at 11 with red eyes. So I always know that's when my adrenaline's been really pushed out of me.
Yep, that's exactly what happens. And that's what the B vitamins do. So that's why we don't want to use them, because all they're doing, they're symptom relievers for the moment, but they make your adrenals even more crash. And so then we have even more problems with infertility or endometriosis or whatever we're fighting.
And what are your thoughts on the gene mutations? They're quite a fad these days.
Oh, it's a fad. I love the word you use, fad. You can have all kinds of gene mutations, but it doesn't mean that the gene is activated. When we can have a genotype is in the DNA that all the genes are present, but is it being expressed in such a way? Then the phenotype is what it's called. And our phenotype is you are having symptoms of, not being able to methylate things well. Or whatever it is, breast cancer, we have a breast cancer gene that a lot of women are running out because they're so scared that if I have the breast cancer gene, I'm going to have both my breasts, amputated. That's a mastectomy, a double mastectomy, because what if I get breast cancer? You don't necessarily have to get breast cancer, because it is environmental factors that can activate the gene. The gene may never be activated.
Like epigenetics.
It's hey, you know the word epigenetics. Good for you.
I love that one.
You were very impressive. Yes, that is actually my major course of studying, where I'm doing most of my PhD work is in the epigenetic changes on the human genome. And
wow.
Epigenetics are always the environmental factors that then will change the gene, and it can activate it. So if you're eating right, we're not going to activate the gene, so there's not a problem.
And you can certainly turn it off, I assume, if you're eating right as well.
Absolutely. Turns on, turns off.
And I love your teachings on coconut oil, consuming it. That's a big one that I had never heard before.
That's another craze, another fad. Coconut oil is right now being put out in our society, by all, I'm going to call it propaganda, because that's exactly what it is. It's
become an industry. I mean, a whole industry.
It is an industry. It is an industry. Coconut oil is being put out as it's wonderful for you because it's an MCT oil. And a lot of people don't even know. They just say, oh, it's an MCT oil, so it's good. MCT stands for medium chain triglyceride. But it really doesn't matter how many carbons are in an atom. Let me just teach you a little bit about fats really quickly. To make a fat like coconut oil or like olive oil or like icosapentaenoic acid, which is fish oil, a very good oil for you, there are a long string of carbon atoms, and the carbon atoms are attached to the next carbon to it, the adjacent carbon on the left or right. And the number of carbons in the chain determines if it's a short chain, medium chain, long chain. Well, coconut oil is a medium chain. It comes with about 10 to 15 carbons in the chain. Most of our oils, like olive oil and, our all the rest of our oils that we think of, canola oil and safflower oil and grapeseed oil, those are 18 carbons long. But we have some long chain fatty acids like pentanoic acid, that's a good fish oil, or over 20. Some of them are like the docosahexaenoic acid, another good fish oil. It is like 24. So we're talking lots of chains. So it's not the length of the chain. So when people say, well, it's a medium chain triglyceride, so it's not as many carbons in the chain, who cares how many carbons are in the chain? We have fantastic oils that have way more than the average oil. It's how are the carbons bonded together? That's the critical piece. See, carbons want to bind with 4 different atoms, and they have to actually bind with 4 different atoms. They will do everything in their power to be able to bind. If they don't, they're a free radical, and they actually destroy your DNA. And then they will eventually get another electron, and they will bind, but then they create a damage on the way. So carbons are always bonded to 4 different things. And in a fat, it will be bound to hydrogens. So it's bound to a carbon on the left and a carbon on the right, and then it's bound to 3rd and 4th bond to hydrogens. These hydrogens are what make a saturated fat. A saturated fat means that every carbon in the chain is bound to as many hydrogens as it can be, which is always 2, except for the last carbon in the chain, and it's called the methyl unit. It's bound to 3 hydrogens because it has to have 4 bonds, so it's bonded to the carbon, the last carbon next to it, and then it has 3 hydrogens attached. When you have as many hydrogens on a carbon chain that is possible, it's a saturated fat. What's a saturated fat? With hydrogen atoms. They're also called ions, hydrogen ions. And so then you have a saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature. You can always tell a saturated fat because it's solid at room temperature. In a medium chain triglyceride, it's a saturated fat. All the bonds you have the maximum amount of hydrogens. In an unsaturated fat, though, at the 3 and the 6 and the 9 position, that means between the 3rd and the 4th carbon in the chain, or between the 6th and the 7th carbon in the chain, or between the 9th and the 10th carbon in the chain, we can actually have double bonds. The carbon still has 4 bonds, but it's decided it's going to make its 4th bond instead of with a hydrogen, it's going to make it with the carbon that it's adjacent to. And so there's a double bond between the carbons. And if you have a double bond, you have an unsaturated fat. It's not full of hydrogen as your saturated fats. And so then it likes to play. When you have, in chemistry, you have to have a molecule that will like to react with other molecules. In a saturated fat like coconut oil, it does not want to react because it is so stable. It has a maximum amount of bonds. It's singly bonded to the carbon next to it and the next to it like after that. And so it cannot play. We cannot utilize that molecule at all unless we make it an unsaturated fat. And we can do that. We can make a saturated fat into an unsaturated fat. It's done in the mitochondria of your cells, and it's through the beta oxidation cycle, which is a 6-step process that 2 steps along the way that you will create a free radical damage. It's called radical oxidative species, which can immediately damage the DNA in that cell. If you damage
which is called aging and gray hair.
Oh, you got it, ma'am. It's aging and gray hair, and then the bottom line is over time, it'll be cancer. And so we alter our DNA because we're making these free radicals because we had to turn the bad fat into a good fat. The saturated fat's a bad fat, and we had to turn it into a good fat, which is unsaturated fat. See, unsaturated fats have that second bond. And so all we have to do is be able to break that second bond, which we can easily do with an electron well. It gets into really complicated chemistry. But then you can bring in the functional group and make things out of it, and it plays well with everybody. It's happy to make chemical reactions, where this coconut oil is not. Coconut oil is the most saturated fat on the planet Earth. There is nothing more saturated than coconut oil. It is 90% saturated. Beef lard comes the next close. It's only 60% saturated. Your coconut oil is worse than eating beef lard.
Wow. And, I love that you say use it on your skin externally. It's great. Been doing it forever, but don't consume it.
Yeah, just don't eat it. Don't cook with it. On your skin, it's a great moisturizer. It holds the water in your skin. And so that makes your skin healthier. You can certainly use it on your skin topically.
And one thing that I feel like I want to add to your list of don'ts if you have crazy adrenal fatigue is skimming on the phone and computer as often. I realized that pumps out so much adrenaline for me is when I'm on like that blue light flickering device.
Yes, it can. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm glad you've added to the list. Yeah, it's just another, and so many people have different adrenal stressors. I mean, it could just be you're in a room full of kids. I've got someone in the kids program. They say, I can't even stand it because the kids are so loud and noisy. It's driving me nuts. But some people love that. So, it's what's affecting you.
And then I think another big one that has really been left out of modern medicine is the rest, the no exercise, if you have inflammation and adrenal issues.
Oh, yeah. We are an exercise-crazed society. We think that exercise is going to heal everything there is. It does not. Exercise demands a large production of hormones, specifically epinephrine and norepinephrine, the adrenal hormones, for you to be able to go out there and lift the weights or to do your power walk or to train for your marathon or whatever you're doing, on the elliptical train or the treadmill. And you have to produce more hormones to do that when you really need to be resting because you have so exhausted your system. That's why you got into this. We hate the word convalesce. We just hate it in our country. When have you ever heard somebody, a physician or any healthcare practitioner tell you, you need to convalesce, which means rest? We know about this is an old-fashioned term, send, the sick person to the seashore for 6 weeks so they do nothing but sit on the beach and do nothing but just rest. That's wonderful.
I love it. And honestly, it's really brought up like a lot of shadow for me and been very hard, but it's honestly been the best thing that's ever happened to me and is certainly accelerating this healing process. Absolutely. And I think that's really, really under prescribed. And I'm just so happy that's a part of your protocol, because I would have never felt like I had the licensing to do it if it wasn't in the name of like true healing.
Yes.
The topic that I think is so fascinating for anybody that's listening and they're like, I'm in perfect health, talking about aging. And one thing I know that you talk about, I've caught, is that you were able to turn your gray hair back to brown, to your natural color. Can you talk about that and what contributes to aging, and then what contributes to the full, as much of a reversal as we can to the aging process?
Absolutely. The aging process is dictated by the breaking of a sigma bond, a single bond between carbons, to be able to convert it into a good fat. We're back in the mitochondria of the cell. That's a place there are several organelles inside a cell. And in the mitochondria, we go through this process. If you have a fat there, a bad fat, a saturated fat, we can't utilize it unless we have an extra bond that the carbon has available, so we can bring in a functional group, another little molecule, and attach to it to reduce inflammation, to make a healthy hair follicle, to change the melanocytes. Those are the sites that give you your pigmentation to your hair or to your skin specifically. And so when we eat a lot of bad fat, then what we're going to do is have this free radical oxidative species, which begins to damage our hair follicles, damage the melanocytes. And so then we age rapidly. We get gray hair, we get wrinkles, we're getting older faster. And that's from our saturated fats. Sugars can become saturated fats, but so you need to know, when you eat a sugar, it's converted into a saturated fat. So that's also causing the aging. But the main thing is our consumption of saturated fats, which is like your coconut oil. It is eating fatty meats like bacon and sausage and bratwurst and hot dogs, cheese, a lot. We're big dairy people in the state of Wisconsin. I think you are too in California. I think you do more.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Than we do in Wisconsin. And so we're big into dairy. All of those things are saturated fats. And so they are going to rapidly increase the aging process, where if we could not eat the saturated fats and we could put in a large amount of the good fats can actually go in and reduce the inflammation on the hair follicle, which is causing your hair to fall out or causing it to gray, and that's again associated with a melanocyte. And so we minimize the damage and actually reverse the damage and make those cells healthy again. So then your hair that's growing out now is no longer gray. It actually, it's the same shaft. I mean, I've got a DVD on this, and I'm actually pulling hairs out of my head and then putting them out so you can see them. See, this is where it grew out of my head. Now it's brown again instead of gray. And
wow.
That's because I am eating the good fats. What are the good fats? They're all your good oils, not coconut oil. That's a bad fat, but olive oil and safflower oil and grapeseed oil and avocado oil. It's your nuts. Oh, the nuts are so good for you. I eat 1.5 cups of nuts a day.
Salted.
They have to be salted. Yes, because to be able to make the reaction happen, the chemical reaction happen, where we have that double bond between the carbons, and we want to bring in another molecule, a functional group is what they're called, to connect onto that carbon chain, you have to break the one bond. But to be able to do that, you have to put energy in. To break a bond in chemistry is what's called an endothermic reaction. You have to put energy into it to break the bond. Well, you have to have a source of energy. And you're thinking, well, we have lots of energy. Well, no, you have to have an electron. We're specifically looking for an electron. So you have to have something that has a free electron available that isn't a free radical. That's normally just has an electron hanging out. And those are our ions. And salt, which is sodium chloride, when you eat it, it ionizes, and the sodium molecule, it's not a molecule, it's an atom, goes off by itself. It has a positive charge. But that chloride ion, an ion, it just means it's got a charge on it, and it's by itself, it has this charge, and it's able to break that double bond, that pi bond. It's called a pi bond, pi, like, the Latin pi. Mm-hmm. And it breaks the pi bond, and then you're able to bring in the functional group. So then you can heal whatever we're trying to heal. You make your skin better, you make the melanocyte better, you make the hair follicle better. So then we don't have the problem with the graying and the aging. So I sent you a picture today, Lacy, I assume you need a profile picture or something for me when you post this podcast. But that picture was taken just a week ago.
Wow.
I am 62 years old. And so you can look at me. I do not dye my hair at all. I want people to see what it looks like to age. And when you're doing things.
And you used to be almost gray, right?
Oh, yes. I used to be almost gray. I have a picture of me they took for a newspaper. I got a newspaper article here. I should sometime upload that too so you can see what I look like. I think I will do that. But I was so going gray, and they came in and interviewed me about something. I can't remember what it was. And they took a picture, and I had that picture. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I was getting really gray there, you know? And
Totally.
now you look at me, and here I am, you know, eating my cup and a half of nuts, and it slows the process of aging, not just a grain, but I mean, you can live longer. We are actually set to live for 120 years. We have a certain lifespan, and our cells all can live for 120 years. We have proven it medically. On the end of your chromosome, you have what's called a telomere. A telomere is an end cap to your chromosome. That's part of your DNA. And then every time you go through a cellular cycle, and each cell has a certain length of time, like the gastrointestinal cells live for 3 days, and your endocrine system cells live for 3 months, and your red blood cells live for 120 days. But each time the cell goes through a cellular cycle, it's called a mitosis, that telomere gets a little bit shorter. And it's set to go through as many cellular cycles as necessary for that particular cell for 120 years.
And those cycles, are they 6 weeks? Am I correct about that?
No, it's different for every cell.
I see. Okay. So different time. Well, there's the person listening that's, you know, they're like, nuts. Oh my God, I have food allergies to nuts. That's one thing we haven't gotten to touch on, food allergies and acne, because the moment I started implementing your protocol, the beans and the nuts, cup and a half a day, eating them separate from the beans, which we can talk about a little bit, instantly my hormonal acne cleared up and my face was glowing. That's what I hear from everybody is like, what are you doing with your skin? So food allergies for the person who's afraid of the nuts, and then also the person who's struggling with acne.
Sure. The food allergies question is, if you can't eat the nuts, then you can eat the oil. You can get avocado oil or olive oil, whatever your oil is. And then you take the oil instead, but you have to salt the oil so that we have an electron well to make this chemical reaction go forward. So if you're going to eat a cup of nuts, then that is equivalent to a quarter cup of oil.
And so that could just be in your salads throughout the day, cooking.
Exactly. It could be in your salads. The only thing that it has to be separate from your beans, because your beans love to bind with fats. Good fats, bad fats. It doesn't care. It's going to bind with fats. And so because it's capturing it in a net, it doesn't work through a chemical reaction. It's a very complex polysaccharide, and it's a net. It's like a mesh, and it captures the molecule. So if you're eating them with beans, then it's not going to be effective. And then your beans aren't effective at carrying your bile out either. So, I mean, you want to keep them separate. So you could have, you know, like your salad dressing or your oil on your salad, but don't eat the beans right then. They just have to be an hour and a half away.
Yes. And that's before you eat the oil and after you eat the oil. And then
Correct.
beans yeah, I love that. And that was a game changer. What about the acne struggler?
The acne struggler, that one is strictly a soluble fiber issue. It is soluble fiber.
I mean, mine cleared up in a week.
Yes. Oh, it clears up. Oh, yes, ma'am. It'll clear up in a week. It's just amazing how fast it goes. It's just your face will heal so rapidly. It's because you're throwing away the hormones. The hormones are what's causing the acne. We threw away the hormones. And so there's no aggravant. And then it just heals up really fast.
And I think the real underline here that we need to piece together for everybody listening is most functions in your body are carried out by a hormone. And that's why this protocol is so brilliant, is because it really addresses all of the hormones of your body, both excreting excess that you no longer need and need to get out, and feeding them.
Exactly. To be able to make the hormones that you need. It's exactly what it is. And yes, you are correct. All chemical reactions are catalyzed or triggered by a hormone. Chemical reactions do not commonly happen on their own. They just are going to happen. Nope, they have to be catalyzed. They have to have a trigger to say, go do this. And it is always a hormone that's a trigger.
Whether that's from brain chemistry to insulin to hormones like sex hormones. I mean, we have so many, sleep. I mean, so many that are going on for those catalysts. So I just think that's why this protocol covers so much, and why it's quite sort of the same for most issues that we're all struggling with in modern society, that this can heal. It's just brilliant. Okay, here are my selfish questions. These will be a couple of quick ones, and then I swear we'll let you go for the day, because I'm sure you have a day full of producing and clients. What's going on for women, facial hair, chin and lip hair?
Facial hair is an overproduction. Usually you see this with something with polycystic ovarian syndrome, but it is because of their production of testosterone. Their testosterone levels are too high. Testosterone is a male hormone. You'll say, wait a minute, we're talking about women here. Women produce testosterone. And the more testosterone we produce, then the more we'll have the problem with the facial hair. So we have to bring down the testosterone level. And inside here, for you to understand, these women will also be high estrogen producers. And why? Because estrogen is made from testosterone.
It's the precursor.
It's the precursor, yes.
How about low libido? Because that came back for me tremendously after starting, and I haven't had that in years.
Yes. The low libido is because you don't have enough of the hormones. See, so we're doing this balancing act. If you have too many of them, you have the overripe egg, and then it explodes and it can't become fertilized because there's no egg to fertilize, or you don't have enough so that you can have that libido. And so that's why we're doing the oils and we're doing the soluble fiber, which is found in the beans, because we want to correct both of those at the same time. We just have to keep them at separate times until we absorb it all and everything gets fixed.
A selfish question I've had for you is I've never heard you really talk about the lymph system and the gallbladder. Out of curiosity, just what are your quickest, biggest thoughts we should know on both pertaining to health?
All right. The lymph system is a wonderful system. By the way, it has nothing to do with the gallbladder. It's a totally separate system.
Yeah, good. The gallbladder was just my curiosity because of bile, but I lumped them together.
Yeah. The lymph system is part of your immune system. It is vital in your fight against disease. And so it's part of, if you are always sick, you always have a cold, you always have the flu, you have swollen lymph under your arm or in your abdomen or in, below your chin and that's where your tonsils are, in your neck, and you have all this swollen lymph, your immune system is struggling. And so that is a protocol that is actually, beans are not the key piece in that. And the key piece in that is your protein and your no list, getting rid of all those things that lower immune system function, which is your sugar, your artificial sweeteners, it's your caffeine. There's a long list of things that we can't do, your saturated fats. And then
dairy is my biggest. It'll instantly swell up my throat lymph system, like my lymph in my throat.
Exactly. And so we just don't do them. Or like perfumes and fragrances. If I walk into a perfumed area, because you do, you go someplace and the whole place stinks to high heaven or whatever, the people there, they're wearing whatever perfume. And immediately I will feel the lymphatic tissue in my neck. They just balloon up. I mean, they will swell to 5 to 6 times their size because the lymph system trying to clear this and trying to keep it from going into the bloodstream. And it's holding these toxins and trying until we can eradicate them. So that's the lymph system. As far as the gallbladder is concerned, the gallbladder is a storage facility for bile. So your liver is dripping some bile directly into your duodenum. That's the first part of your small colon. But the vast majority of your bile is going into the gallbladder. The gallbladder will concentrate your bile to 10 times its strength to make it a stronger soap. Bile is a soap because it's going to emulsify the fats that you're eating. That's how it digests them and emulsifies them. And so you will get a stronger soap so you can do a better job of digestion. If you are recycling your bile over and over and over again because you're not eating soluble fiber, you're adding hydrogens onto that carbon chain, and then it becomes a saturated fat. And I've already told you that saturated fats are solid at room temperature. They are, and it happens the same way in the body. The more hydrogens you add onto the carbon chain by recycling your bile fluids will actually start to go from a liquid state. They will change their physical state into being a solid state. Along the way, they will get sludgy and be like mud, and then that causes a lot of difficulty in going down the biliary ducts to release into your gastrointestinal tract. It can slow down. It's called an ejection fraction. Those are measured with HIDA scans, and that you can have not a good gallbladder function. You have pain, discomfort, pressure, and then they can roll into little solid pieces of bile because you have such a high, you are now at maximum hydrogen ion concentration, and you've changed the physical state of the bile to a solid. We call those gallstones.
What about, so something that happened to me, which was really interesting. I got this once as a child, a wart on my finger. And then as soon as I started doing the protocol and traveled, I had like 2 or 3 pop up, and they have obviously since gone away. What is creating that? Is that just low immunity? What's happening there? Is it detoxification?
No, not a detoxification at all. It is a low immunity. Whenever we develop warts, it's caused by a herpes virus. Viruses are something, once we're exposed to them, and most of us are exposed in utero to these viruses.
I think I was, because I've always tested positive for HPV.
Yeah. So what happens is that viruses, they're not like a bacteria, like we were talking about Lyme. That's a bacteria. We eradicate it. It is gone. It is not in your bloodstream and it's forever gone. But with viruses, they never eradicated. They are locked into the cytosol of the cell. The cytosol is the fluid that keeps all the organelles from bumping into each other inside a cell in membrane. So the cell has got the cell wall, and then you go inside of that, then there's this fluid, and that's called the cytosol. And so that's where these viruses reside, and they will stay there for their whole life. They're not going to do anything to you unless your immune system function falters. If your immune system is keeping those their RNA strands, it's a type, it's not a DNA, it's an RNA. It's the precursor to a DNA. It's just a strand of genetic material. That genetic material can never mature and become anything unless your immune system turns its back. If your immune system is suppressed, you're tired, you've been overdoing it, you're eating things that always lower the immune system function, then what will happen is that those little viruses, and this is specifically the herpes virus, will say, ooh, the immune system's back is turned. They're like the guard marching back and forth across the prison door, and there's no lock on the prison door, and the guard's gone now, so I'm going to pop out. Mm-hmm. And it actually it commandeers the cell machinery and it replicates itself. And then through a process called exocytosis, it will eject all these RNA strands right outside of the cell. And then you develop a wart or a fever blister, because fever blisters are caused by herpes viruses too. And it's always when your immune system is suppressed.
I see. Okay, that's what I sort of intuited. What about floating bowel movements? I'll get those every once in a while.
You want to have floating bowel movements. It means that you're carrying enough bile that you have bound. The bile is a fat. And so you're carrying enough of the bile into the toilet, and it's bound as a soluble fiber, that it will float. See, fat is lighter than water, so fat will always float on the top of water.
I've had those more and more. So that means I'm actually physically seeing the bile coming out.
You are actually seeing physically the bile coming out. Now, bile usually gives your stools a greenish color too.
Which I've had. That's great to know. I love knowing this stuff. Like nothing's too TMI for me.
Okay, yeah, bile is green. And so when we want our stools to float. That's all my stools float. They've been floating for years. No one's a stinker.
Wow. This is so exciting, because I was starting to get worried. I'm like, they're doing it more often. Is this an issue? No, this is fantastic.
Getting better and better and better. That's
excellent.
Great.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And then I think my very last question too, they're kind of simultaneous. As a recovering supplement junkie, an herbal junkie, an herbalist, I'm so tempted, Karen, to take milk thistle, to decoct the milk thistle to help my liver get those excess hormones out quicker. And then to take the Vitex decoction, like drink it, so no alcohol, in order to help speed up the healing of my hormones. What are your thoughts?
No, wrong. It's not a solution at all. It's the wrong thing. Your liver does not have to, it doesn't need help to get rid of the toxins in the liver. It does that very efficiently all day long. The problem is it recycles. And so the focus is not getting the liver to release more of the toxins in the bile and it goes into the gastrointestinal tract. It's getting the bile out of the gastrointestinal tract into the toilet. That's So we always release plenty of bile. If you were not releasing enough bile, you would have an elevated AST, ALT. These are liver enzymes, alkaline phosphatase, elevated bilirubin. These would be liver enzymes. They would all be highly elevated because you're not excreting the toxins. Milk thistle, you already excrete tons of bile from your liver. It's just you allow it to recycle.
I see. Okay, so don't give in to the temptation.
Temptation, no, because all you'll do is you'll get a larger bile release and you can have nauseousness and be an upset stomach. No, we don't do that.
Wonderful. Okay, so for everybody listening, go ahead and surmise the courses that are out now and coming out, Karen, that kind of cover every single thing we've talked about in this. We didn't touch cancer. You have a whole seminar on that as well, and also a free article under that topics page for people as well, which you can help tremendously.
Yes. I've got these e-courses, and I really recommend people do the e-courses above everything, because if you're going to try to get in to see me, it could take a while to get in to see me. And these things, as you summarized so nicely, Lacy, they're covering things better than I can explain to you in an hour-long consultation, because I'm spending so much time taking in all your data and, figuring out your plan. I mean, all of these things are all figured out for you. I've spent huge amount of times to develop these courses. And so those ones that are available to you now, if you go to my website, on the landing page of my website, you'll see Explore Our e-courses. Just click that link and you'll go down there. But currently live, we have one on infertility, one on what I call the 5 sisters. It's the PMS, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, uterine fibroids, and fibrocystic breast disease, because they're all caused by the same thing. I also have a course on overcoming acne. I'm about to release courses on several other things. So one just on general nutrition, because some people just say, hey, help me in understanding, just how to eat well in general. ADHD, that's attention deficit hyperactivity, is coming out. Actually,
for children and adults, same protocol.
For children and adults, it's the same protocol. And I'm very specific about what that protocol is. That's already recorded and coming out. And so all these things you're seeing coming out soon. Gout, chronic constipation, diabetes, gallbladder, hair loss, how to regrow your hair, eczema, hypothyroidism, and then all of the whole ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, SIBOs, the small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. All of those are, there's so many more. There's dumping syndrome, cyclic vomiting syndrome. All of that is coming out in one that I'm calling the 10 brothers, because it's all caused by the same thing.
Wow.
Pregnancy, morning sickness, hyperemesis. That means throwing up, morning sickness where you throw up all the time. That's almost done and coming out. Psoriasis, menopause, because a lot of women are going through menopause and they're having horrible hot flashes, weight loss, those are all the courses coming out. Certainly you can do, I have several lectures that I've recorded and you can do those. They are more in general. These courses.
Yeah, that's what kicked me off, was the infertility and hormonal one it was just so wonderful to even get explanations to what was going on. And you kind of understand a bit of the protocol. These courses, I'm assuming, have the full protocol for each of them inside of them.
It is a full protocol, and then a flow chart so you can figure out where you are. Do I have mild PMS? Do I have moderate PMS? Do I have severe PMS? Do I actually have PCOS? Because the protocol is just a little bit different for PCOS than it is for like endometriosis. And all of those protocols are on these courses, and I'm very specific. And what if I weigh this much? What if I weigh that much? It's like, okay, well, if you're this much, you need to eat this much. So I'm specific. And then besides the flow charts and the specific protocols for each one, also I have made myself available through a platform we're using, the frequently asked questions, that if you have a question that you don't, understand from the course, or that something's happening to you, all you have to do is email me, and I am posting the answers on the course. So everybody that's taking that course can read your question and read the answer to that.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So that you're not locked out of, it's just like, I don't know what to do. No, I will stick with you until you are well. I'll just be available by email, and then eventually all the questions will be answered because all the questions are asked. And then so other people taking the course will say, I remember seeing that in frequently asked questions. I can go there.
Brilliant. We actually are releasing something just like that in the new year called the Index. And we have this thing called Supported, and it's where people email all of their manifestation questions. And I teach it every 2 weeks digitally. It's a video and audio we put out. And now we're going to be posting all of them so people can go straight to the Index. So I love that you're doing that. I'm actually looking on the site right now, and I'm like, definitely going to buy the infertility pregnancy one and how to conquer PMS right after this call. But what I really want to stress to people who are tuning in, 2 things. As a person who's now 3 months in on this program, and I think it's really important to mention that you really see the progress in 3-month cycles, because that's how your endocrine system works. You need to be in it for the long game. And I think what I loved about you, Karen, when we first spoke, and Unique has been so clear about this, is it could take up to 6 to 9 months for me, for the stuff that's going on. Other people's issues could take a little bit longer. Some people might just be 3 months. It's more of a long game. So that's one thing you can touch on a tiny bit. And then the second thing, the coolest thing about this is it's like the cheapest way to heal on the planet. You're literally buying beans and food and nothing else. Like, you're not taking supplements anymore. You're not paying for drinks out anymore. You're not like splurging on the kombuchas anymore and the coffees. You're like getting richer and healthier at the same time from somebody who has spent thousands of dollars on trying to heal and not seeing tons of results.
Yeah. Yeah. To answer your question about, why are we in this for the long game? That's because we cannot control the mitosis of cells. That means a cellular life, a cellular cycle. Every cell in the human body has a different lifespan, and we can't change that. It is dictated by the DNA. No one can change it. So for some of these cells, like the endocrine system cells that are controlling infertility and PMS, there's a 3-month lifespan on that. There's just no way to get around it. You're still going to have the same old nasty cells that are beat up, bludgeoned, and don't do a good job. You're going to have them for 3 months. You just do. And then after 3 months, you'll have a new set of cells that you have been treating to the red carpet, treatment. And they're getting all the food that they need to be healthy. You're doing everything. You're not damaging them. And so then they're going to get out there and they're going to work for you. They're going to do the job that they were meant to do.
Amazing. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Karen. I'm so grateful. And I can't wait till our appointment. I think it's next week or the week after, so I can pick your brain about more things. I can't seem to get enough. And I'm just so grateful because I've seen, incredible results. And I just think it's so awesome that this is now accessible for other people to have that same luxury. It's amazing.
I'm delighted to know you. Lacy. I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you so much. And you too. And have a beautiful afternoon. Stay warm out there.
Oh, I will. It's cold here in Spain.
You guys are already getting it, the full shebang.
Oh, yeah. We've already had several snowfalls.
Wow. Yeah. We have 2 girls on our team, one from Wisconsin, one from Minnesota. And they totally baffled me as somebody who's from California, born and raised. They were like, we have such a thing that's called freeze days. So if you stay out too long, you'll freeze literally to death. And I was like, what?
Yes, of course. We do have those days. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea about that living in California. So stay warm.
Okay. You have a wonderful day. Thank you, Lacy.
You too. Bye, Karen. Now I feel better having this into the world when I tell people that I'm doing a bean protocol. It makes a lot more sense. If you have anything you're struggling with in health or you have family and friends, I highly suggest forwarding this episode to them. I know it seems crazy at first, but it's actually been profoundly helpful for me. And so I listed off in the beginning what it's been healing and how quickly. And if you're interested in finding out more about Karen, I highly suggest heading to her site, starting first with her topics page, looking to see if what you're struggling with is under it. She has a plethora of this podcast or radio show she was on for 9 years. At the bottom of that, you can listen to episodes where you'll hear clients who have actually had profound transformations through doing this. And then certainly exploring her new workshops that she has available online. And certainly if you're looking for a coach to walk you through this process and take you a lot deeper, Unique Hammond will have her linked below as well. Good luck and happy New Year.